The owl's unblinking, amber eyes bore into the prince's first son as he stood in the moonlit forest clearing. Its wings stretched wide, casting shadows over the trees. "Your father defied the covenant," it croaked, its voice like the rattling of dry bones. "You will pay the price." Long ago, in the vast kingdom of Obiola, a warrior prince named Ikemba was both feared and revered. His strength was unmatched, his conquest legendary. Yet, beneath his formidable exterior lay a hubris that often ignored the wisdom of his ancestors. Among the many traditions of Obiola, there was one sacred law that could never be broken: never harm an owl. "They are the eyes of Oni," the elders would say, referring to the Earth Mother who governed all life. Through them, Oni watches over the land. Spill their blood, and her judgment will be swift. But Ikemba had no patience for what he called old wives' tales. He dismissed the warnings as mere superstition, relics of a weaker time. His disregard for the covenant set him on a path that would doom not only himself but his bloodline. One fateful evening, during a hunt in the thick forest surrounding Obiola, Ikemba and his warriors stumbled upon a great horned owl. It sat on a low branch, its enormous amber eyes fixed on the prince. "Look at it." Ikemba laughed, knocking an arrow to his bow. "This bird dares to mock me." His warriors whispered among themselves, urging him to leave it be. "My prince, it is a bad omen to kill an owl," one of them dared to say. Ikemba scoffed. "Omen or not, I will not be challenged by a mere bird." He drew his bowstring taut and released the arrow. It struck true, piercing the owl's chest. The bird fell to the ground, lifeless, its amber eyes dimming. For a moment, the forest fell unnaturally silent. Not a leaf rustled, not a cricket chirped. Then, in the distance, a chorus of owl cries erupted, filling the air with an otherworldly cacophony. Ikemba felt a chill run down his spine, but he shook it off, laughing to mask his unease. That night, the elders of Obiola gathered at the palace, their faces grim. The eldest among them, a frail woman named Neka, spoke first. "Prince Ikemba," she began, her voice low and steady, "you have broken the covenant with Oni. The owls are her messengers. You have silenced one, but they will not forget. You must atone, or your lineage will suffer." Ikemba waved her off. "Enough of this nonsense. No bird, no spirit, can challenge me. Let them come." From that night onward, strange things began to happen in Obiola. The owls came in droves, perching on the palace walls, their amber eyes glowing in the darkness. Their cries echoed through the halls, sleepless nights tormenting the prince and his household. Servants whispered that they saw shadows moving in the corridors, though no one was there. Guards stationed outside the palace gates reported feeling invisible claws brush against their skin, sending them fleeing in terror. Ikemba forbade anyone from mentioning the owls, declaring it treason to speak of them. Yet, his arrogance could not silence the fear that grew among his people. Years passed, and Ikemba's son, Obina, grew into a strong and noble young man. Unlike his father, Obina was kind and respectful of the old ways. The people loved him, seeing in him a hope for a better future. But on the night of Obina's 18th birthday, the owl's cries grew deafening. The palace walls seemed alive with their presence, and the air grew cold. That night, Neko returned, her face pale and her voice trembling. "The curse has ripened," she said. "Prince Ikemba, the owls have come to claim your son." Ikemba, now visibly aged and haunted by sleepless nights, shouted at her. "Leave my palace, you harbinger of fear. My son is untouchable." But Obina, ever curious and brave, decided to confront the truth. That night, armed with his father's bow, Obina ventured into the forest alone. The air was thick with mist, and the only sound was the faint rustling of leaves. He followed the sound of the owl's cries until he reached a clearing bed in moonlight. There, on a low branch, sat a great horned owl, larger than any Obina had ever seen. Its feathers shimmered like silver, and its amber eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. "Why do you torment my family?" Obina asked, his voice steady despite the fear rising in his chest. The owl tilted its head, studying him. Then it spoke, its voice deep and resonant. "Your father spilled sacred blood, and now his blood must repay. The covenant was broken." Obina knelt before the owl, tears streaming down his face. "I had no hand in this. I am innocent. What must I do to end this curse?" The owl's eyes softened. "There is a way," it said. "Your father must confess his sin and offer himself to honest judgment. Only then will the curse be lifted." Obina returned to the palace and confronted his father. "Father, the curse is real. The owls demand justice. You must confess and atone, or I will be taken." Ikemba, now a shadow of his former self, slumped in his chair, his face pale and his hands trembling. Yet, even in his broken state, his pride remained. "I am the prince," he roared. "I bow to no one, not even the gods." Before Obina could respond, the windows shattered, and a swarm of owls poured into the chamber. They circled Ikemba, their cries deafening, their wings stirring up a violent wind. Obina tried to intervene, but the owls pushed him back, forming a wall of feathers and claws. The great horned owl descended, landing before Ikemba. "Your time is up," it said, its voice echoing through the chamber. Ikemba screamed as the owl's talons sank into his chest. His body convulsed, then fell limp. The owls departed, leaving only silence behind. The next morning, Obina stood before the elders, his face solemn. "My father's pride has ended the curse," he said. "Let this be a lesson to us all. The spirit of the land must always be respected." Obina became a just and humble ruler, teaching his people to honor the old ways. The owls no longer haunted the palace, but they remained in the forest, watching from the shadows, a reminder of the price of defiance. And so, the tale of the prince, the owl, and the curse was passed down through generations, a warning to all who would dare challenge the covenant with the spirits of the land. In the forest, under the light of the moon, the owl's eyes still gleam, ever watchful, ever vigilant.